All right, here we are. 2020 is off to a heck of a start, huh? Now, if you were part of the Hebraic faith, that the new year either just started with the first visible crescent, which occurred the other night, or it hasn't started yet. If you go by the full moon, nevertheless, we know that the new year doesn't start in the dead of winter, but being that we live in American society and American society is structured off of a Gregorian calendar, when you hear me referencing the new year, understand that that is the context of which I'm saying. I know we don't like to subscribe to it, but we still operate and function in this country that does operate off that calendar, so understand that. Alright, so now that that is out the way, back to what I was trying to say. This is off to a heck of a start, huh? So here we are. I've been seeing and observing, and now I feel like it's time for me to speak. And not that my words are weightier or more mighty than someone else's words. That's not the case. Uh, but there's one thing about me is that I do not like to speak presumptuously. All right, that's one thing I do not want to do is speak too soon. I would much rather sit back, watch, observe, see how other people are responding. Because when stuff goes on, when incidents occur, you begin to see the nature of individuals. You either see leaders being born or cowards showing their true self. That's what you end up finding out when things begin to happen. Um, so I sat back, I was watching, and I was seeing a lot of different narratives by our people, but I decided not to say anything because I would much rather sit back, watch, and try to get as much data as I can or information that I can before before I can make a true assessment of what's going on. See, one thing I don't want to do is treat this platform that I have with contempt, so I don't want to devalue my words. I don't want to diminish them, and I don't want to degrade my effectiveness in being able to reach the people who I am attempting to reach. So, one thing that happens is if you're speaking too fast on too many things, then more than likely you're going to be wrong a lot more than you really need to be. You're gonna find yourself in positions where you either have to retract or act like what you said never came out your mouth, and that's actually worse. That's actually worse than just backtracking or retracting a statement that you made. But people on the outside who are watching us, if they constantly see people are just spewing whatever, right? Whatever comes out, whatever they see, and they're casting a judgment on it and trying to say how this is this definitively. See, it amazes me how so many of us will speak with so much conviction about stuff that we have no idea about. It reminds me of when I first came into the awakening, and I myself was very outspoken. And then next thing I know, 3 months later, those things that I was so outspoken about, I switched up those doctrines. So I didn't even believe that no more. So it's like we say this truth as if our understanding isn't ever evolving. But we can be so outspoken about things and not have the full picture, not even have over half the picture, and it can be so outspoken. So we really have to be very careful because people are watching, and you're devaluing your ability to reach them, and you are actually bringing this awakening under more scrutiny and causing it to be less credible to your brothers and sisters and to those on the outside looking in. All right, so keep that in mind. So let's address this coronavirus thing real quick. All right, is the coronavirus man-made? All right, so let's address this. One thing that I noticed that as Hebrews have a tendency to do is that we tend to get distracted by the small, insignificant things, the things that really don't make a difference. All right, it doesn't hurt to look into it. It doesn't hurt to investigate the patent, but don't get so caught up on the origins of the virus and you completely miss the effects of it, because no matter if it okay, so before I go further, coronavirus is actually just a blanket term. Coronavirus is a blanket term for a group or segment of viruses. So this is where you get COVID-19, you also get SARS, you also get MERS, You get other viruses within there. So whether it is due to manufacturing or it's the actual mutation of a current virus, it doesn't matter because the effects of this virus is legit. So it doesn't matter. The virus does exist because people are getting sick and people are dying, right? I remember for a while people didn't think that people were getting sick. No, people are getting sick. People didn't believe that black people can get it. Believe me, believe me, I understand the skepticism that comes from black folk, right? Like, we've been lied to a lot. We've always been mistreated by the government. We don't trust doctors or anything like that. So don't get me wrong. I can understand, and there are certain things that this virus, certain things within underlying health issues that this thing seems to really affect those type of people more. And there are certain blood types where it seems to affect people more. But at the end of the day, here's a nice little fun fact for you. Like, in response to people saying, because I don't hear it anymore because we have seen multiple black people get it now. But I remember when I was first hearing it, I would laugh to myself like that's a pretty interesting remark, because we don't trust doctors, like, as a whole, as a community. Black folk don't trust doctors anyway. So you would be hard pressed. We don't want to find out we got high blood pressure, let alone find out we got the coronavirus, that we got COVID-19. We ain't trying to do that so that they can try to give us a vaccine when we don't trust that either. So we naturally are skeptical of a lot more things than a lot of other nations are. So if we get sick, odds are most of us ain't even gonna go to the doctor. I tell you right now, if I were to get it, I ain't going to no doctor. I am going to treat myself. I got herbs, I got teas, I got essential oils, I got resources, people and doctors that's in my corner who we can consult, that can tell me what I need to do to treat myself and or my family and friends if this was to occur. I ain't going to the doctor, and most black people ain't gonna go to the doctor. But at the end of the day, before I go on a tangent, it doesn't matter about the origins. Don't get lost trying to figure that out and get sidetracked. The effects of this thing is legit. People are dying. People are getting it. People are dying. Schools have closed down. The economy is collapsing. People are losing jobs. It's crazy. It is absolutely crazy the amount of things that is occurring because of this virus. So the origin of it really is insignificant. Are people being affected by it? Look around. If your children are at home and being schooled, if your children are being schooled at home versus in the actual institutions that they created, then you're being affected by it. If you now have to work from home, you're being affected by it. If you go to the store and you can't find things that you typically just buy, just not because you're trying to stack up or not because there's some crisis, but simple things like, let's say, toilet paper, stuff that we typically buy normally. Have you tried to buy something lately? It ain't there. I don't know why it's not there. Like, that still baffles me. I was at the store today and I saw a bunch of water, and there was no toilet paper. I'm still trying to figure that one out, but nevertheless, it is impacting people in different ways. But it's, at the end of the day, it's impacting people. So we can't get so lost on the origins, right? That we forget that, that's a very small thing. All right. Next question. Is this COVID-19 pandemic a false flag? So I would say this. Before I answer that, we need to understand what a false flag is, because it's often misconstrued and misunderstood as being a fake event. While some false flags are labeled and can be classified as fake events, some of the school shootings are very, very questionable. And some of them I just really don't believe ever happened at all. But there are things that are considered false flags that are actual events. But what a false flag really is because America is like, false flags is not just central to America. Germany has done false flags. Like, false flags have been carried out for since time immemorial, right? So what it is it is an event conducted usually by a nation's government on itself under the guise of it being someone else. All right. So there was a document when I first started to wake up, and I can't remember what it's called, but it was a declassified document, and it dates back to when Kennedy was in office, and the methods behind this document was that they wanted to go to war with Cuba, but they needed public backing to go to war. See, they don't just go to war. They need to get the people behind them to support the war. So what they wanted to do with Cuba was that they were going to attack their own ships off the coast and then blame it on the Cubans. They was going to blame it on Cuba. So there was going to be people on the ship and people were going to die. But the American government was going to conduct that itself and blame it on someone else. It's like 9/11. Actually, matter of fact, that one, for some reason I can't remember what it's called right now. But that's what actually really opened my eyes to believe that 9/11 was plausible, because if I saw that this was going to happen in the 60s, this was literally the same thing that they're talking about doing or that was believed to be done for 9/11. And so 9/11 is another good example. Like 3,000 people there wasn't 3,000 actors. People died in 9/11, right? People died in 9/11. We did see footage of people jumping out of windows because they were just so panic stricken that they didn't know what to do. So they would rather take their chances jumping out of a window versus dealing with jet fuel or bombs or whatever the case may be. So 9/11 was an event conducted against America by its government, and then blamed to be done by someone else to get people behind them to support a war. All right, that's a false flag. We got to understand what a false flag is. I remember when I was here in Georgia, and when the church got shot up in I think it was South Carolina by a dude, Dylan Roof, I remember seeing people saying that was fake, that it never happened. And for the first time, like I have different perspectives on things because I've experienced things. And for the first time, me being what they would consider a conspiracy theorist, conspiracy fact if you ask me, but conspiracy theorist, I would see these things and be like, yeah, that's fake, that's fake, that's fake. And then this occurred, and I'm seeing people say that's fake, but I'm looking at someone in Georgia who was mourning for their family, like crying when they got the news for a family member that died in that church. So I saw that, people actually die in these events. Some of them, people actually die. So everything that we can consider a false flag does not mean that actual lives were not lost. There's usually an agenda behind these things. So if you look at 9/11, after that occurred, then what happened? The Patriot Act came into play, and anytime a school shooting or something happens, then they want to take away our guns, which anyone who follows history knows what happens next after countries take away your guns. Anyone who follows history will know this, right? So that's why it's such a big deal that people don't want to give up their guns. And a lot of people are even ignorant to the history of it, but it's just a natural distrust of government. So understand what a false flag is. Do I think that this is a false flag? I don't think it's a false flag. Simply because then it will have to be a global false flag, and that's much harder to carry out. A global event, like you can have a lot of nations agree to a treaty, like we've seen this in the history, and I don't want to get people sidetracked by stating what type of things we've seen this for, but we've seen nations come to treaties, create treaties to not visit certain places or not to do certain things. There was no treaties in place here. This was just something happened, and it bounced from here to here to here to here. once again, this is not whether or not it's manufactured or not. It's about if this question is about if it's a false flag, and I personally don't think it's a false flag. Someone could have created it and released it, and this is the result. But I don't think it's by definition a false flag, because once again, you're dealing with different nations, and different nations are handling this thing completely different as well. So no, I do not think that this is a false flag. That is my perspective on that matter. All right, next. What do we do now? That is a great question. I'm glad you asked. So, what do we do now? We need to prepare. We should have been preparing before, and this is not to pat myself on the back, but as a moray of TCA, Torah Culture Assembly, even when I was under the banner of another ministry, I was telling my assembly and individuals that we need to create a storehouse, that we need to all be able to donate canned goods and non-perishable items to this storehouse. We have this stored at a location where, if in the event of something happening, because something was going to happen, in the event of some sort of a crisis when resources are limited, those people who have donated, we have this reservoir of food and materials and items that we could have that would be able to safeguard us in the event that something actually went wrong. And people thought that was a great idea, but a lot of people didn't want to help move it forward. So okay, now let's go. Okay, let's make sure that in your individual households that you have something stocked up, that you have food stocked up, that you learn how to be able to grow food. Because if you learn how to grow food, then you can always have something. And then we need to start doing this stuff as soon as possible, and prepare. Make sure that you just have something available for you in the event that something happens. Now, I'm not the only person who have said this stuff. There are other ministries who have also said the same things, and much respect to those ministries. However, I don't really understand the logic behind some ministries, Christian and Hebrew alike, who was condemning people for wanting to prepare, or condemning people who were preparing, and mislabeling them, and really creating this atmosphere of distrust for your brother and sister, and sole reliance on self under the guise of your faith. See, we have to understand that there's always a ploy of sleight of hand. It happens within the government, and it also happens with, unfortunately, it happens with ministries when they have a certain agenda that they want to get across. Then they will teach you, and there's nothing wrong with an agenda. Agenda just means that, this is a goal. This is something that you're attempting to accomplish, something that you're trying to carry out. So an agenda in itself is neutral. It's the intentions behind the agenda and the way that you're going to carry out the agenda which makes it either wicked or righteous. You know what I'm saying? So I don't want to say like they have an agenda and that means that they had a wicked, a malicious intent. That's not what I'm saying. But they maybe do have an agenda, or they have a disdain towards a certain outlook, or they're maybe comfortable in a certain situation and position that they don't want to have anything change that. And so they're not going to speak about something that's going to cause them to have to change that same position that they are comfortable in. It could be a plethora of different things, but nevertheless, there are Christian ministries and Hebraic ministries as well who were teaching against preparing, and I don't get it. And once again, that concept isn't scriptural. I mean, even if you just go to the New Testament and you just take a surface glance over the 10 virgins with the oil, and some ran out and some were prepared and some wasn't. You just that's just surface reading. But if you really want to get down to some examples in scriptures, you can see that there was preparation involved, and it was not condemned. So let's take a look at a couple things real quick. All right, so we're going to start off with Noah. So we all know the story of Noah. I'm not going to belabor the point. We know Noah was commanded to build an ark. He did that. Okay, so the context of this, right? The context of this is that the Most High warns Noah about a coming flood. So Noah, what he is commanded to do is to prepare. Well, how is Noah supposed to prepare? Noah, there's a flood coming, build an ark. All right? I'm going to save mankind through you. Build an ark. Through his obedience, he built the ark. Okay, you're going to build the ark like this, like that. You're going to do this, X, Y, Z. Okay, your ark is built. Now, grab these animals. You bring these animals in here, clean, unclean. You bring these animals into the ark. Bam. Okay. Now, what is Moses and his family, what is Noah and his family going to eat? They're not going to eat the animals that's there to repopulate the earth. So what are they going to eat? Matter of fact, at this point, there is no record of mankind even eating animals. There's no record. All right, let's make sure that's clear. So he tells them, Genesis 6:21, also take with you every sort of food that is eaten and store it up. All right, let me read that again. Genesis 6:21, also take with you every sort of food that is eaten and store it up, and it shall serve as food for you and for them, meaning the animals. So the Most High, in all his power and glory, decided that he was going to have Noah prepare. Noah was a prepper. Noah, you go ahead, you grab this food, and you store it up, because it's going to serve as food for you as long as you're on there, and quite frankly, after he got off as well. So not only while he was on there, but immediately after getting off, it had to be food as well. Why? Because the ground was saturated. Stuff was destroyed. It had to go back. So it had to not only be enough to survive that time when it was on there, but it had to be enough that even when he got off the ark, while things was coming back to its normal form, that it had to be enough to sustain them as well. So he had to be prepared. Think about that. So, and in a time like this, now that a crisis has come, some of us are prepared because we've been storing up food, so that when in the event of an event, we have something to fall back on if and when resources are limited or cut off. I don't understand how we can talk about martial law so much in this community and not have anything stored up. Like, that's just being reckless. That is being reckless, and you're just full of head knowledge, and you're not even thinking about the repercussions of what you're even talking about. That's all. That's really what that is. That is so reckless. So you got Noah. He's taught to bring food onto the ark. Food for him, food for the animals. So there's no harm in you storing up food, because the Most High had Noah do it. I mean, the Most High in all his power and glory could have created a food that just appeared out of nowhere. I mean, he caused a bush to burn, and he caused manna to fall from heaven, and he led them with a pillar of fire and with a cloud and all of this stuff, right? So he can part the ocean, the seas, and you can walk across on dry land. He can do all of these things, but he told Noah to bring some food on the ark. That's so normal. That's so normal and practical. Like, Noah, store up some food, bring it onto the ark. We be too deep sometimes. Like, we be wanting stuff with this artificial faith that we have. But we swear our faith is so strong. We really do. Until actually something happens to where we are in a position where we're uncomfortable. But I ain't gonna go that far. Not right now, anyway. Okay, next story. Joseph, very familiar story as well. Pharaoh has a couple dreams. He calls people to interpret it. Joseph is the one who's able to interpret it. He tells them that you're going to have 7 years of plenty, then 7 years of famine. And then Joseph, not the Most High, the Most High gave him the ability to interpret dreams, but Joseph was the one who rendered this next portion. So I'm going to go ahead and read it. And keep in mind here, this is Joseph. This does not say, and the Lord said. It does not say the Most High said, or anything like that. Any name that you want to substitute there, it does not say that it came from him. This came from Joseph. Genesis 4:32 through 36. So this is after he interprets the dream. He interprets the dream. He interprets it correctly because he was given that ability by the Most High. And so this is what he says to him. And the doubling of Pharaoh's dream means that the thing is fixed by God or Yah, and Yah will shortly bring it about. Now therefore let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man. Read that again. Now therefore let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh proceed and appoint overseers over the land and take 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt during the 7 plentiful years. And let them gather all the food of these good years that are coming and store up, there's that phrase again, and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh for food in the cities, and let them keep it. That food shall be a reserve for the land against the 7 years of famine that are to occur in the land of Egypt, so that the land may not perish through the famine. I think about this. If he didn't do that, then we would not be here, because our ancestors, um, the brothers of Joseph, the Israelites, they came there because of the famine. So if that food was not stored up, if Joseph wasn't wise enough to render this, we can presume that they would have been wiped out. It's a presumption, but we can presume just by the flow of the story that, yeah, if Joseph didn't do this, we can automatically assume that Pharaoh would have instituted something like this. Then there you go. Then there is no us. But because the Most High gave him an ability, and he also operated in wisdom, that we were spared through Joseph. So we see once again that there is nothing wrong in preparing. There is a wisdom in preparing. So much so that if you consider yourself one who is able to understand the scriptures and you can see what's coming, right? So many of us feel that we understand prophecy so much better now, and that we can understand that, hey, we are in the times, we are in the end times, and this things is about to happen, and this happens because of this, and this blood moon represents this, and these waters are turning red over here, and we're following all of these current events, and we're supposed to be able to see that all of this is going on, but yet and still we ain't prepared our homes. Proverbs 22:3 says, "The prudent sees danger and hides himself, but the simple go on and suffer for it." If you have the capacity and the ability to see these things and to know what's coming, and you don't do it, and you don't take the precautions necessary, and you don't provide for your household, and you don't prepare those who are around you, then you, my friend, are a terrible leader. You gotta say something. You gotta try to do something. Alright, so that's what we need to do. We need to prepare. And at this point, those who have prepared, then good. But those who haven't prepared, there's still time, there's still hope. But you gotta take it serious though, and you have to do this. You gotta walk this thing out in the steps. So you gotta begin to put stuff aside. Like you can start now. You can start now, and I will recommend it, because once again, if we believe that martial law is going to kick in, then you're not going to get anything. And I don't want to scare anyone, and I don't want to project fear onto anyone. But this is the sober reality that we must face, because we can't continue to declare all of these things as if we're not going to feel effects from it. Like, we can't declare that Babylon fall, but yet don't believe that we're going to suffer the effects of Babylon falling. I'm not saying don't declare it, please do, but make sure that as Babylon fall, that you get out the way from it. So imagine Babylon, imagine the Tower of Babel, so to speak. So if imagine that thing's falling and you're looking at it and you're just shouting at it, but you ain't done nothing. You ain't got out the way. And that thing is gonna crush you. That thing is gonna crush you. So now is the time for you to prepare. Go get you some essential items. Go get rice and beans, right? Stock up on that, because even hey, if we ain't got food, if you don't have access to food for 4 or 5 weeks, um, at least you got rice and beans. You might be tired of it after a while, and once everything clear up, you probably won't want to eat rice and beans again for a good year or two. But you will have your food. So stock up on that. Um, grab you some other essential items, man. Talk to your teachers about preparation, because I know some people, and I say talk to your teachers because I know, when it comes to YouTube, people who may not be directly under me watch these videos. So I may not be your specific teacher. I may just be a teacher that you listen to. But talk to your teachers, and if you want more details, then inbox us at info.toracultureassembly@gmail.com, and we will reply as far as some stuff that you would need for this time. And this is because it's real. It's real, like, and you have to take it serious. You have to understand that, like, for me, my concern isn't a virus. Well, you know what my concern would be, and it's not a fear, but it's a concern. My concern is not a virus, but it's how people are going to react once the resources are low. Right? How are people going to react when those things happen? So if you live in cities, and you're on top of each other, or you're in apartments, if it comes to that, and let's pray that it doesn't, right? That may be a conflict of interest to some people, because there's so much vitriol that we have against this nation, which is understandable. But there got to be a level of reason as well. There got to be a level of reason. So preparation is key. All right. So once again, reach out to us, and we will try to point you in the direction that you should be going at this point in time. Looking at the numbers, like the numbers for this thing is jumping. Like every couple of days is jumping rapidly. So 3 days ago, I looked at the numbers, and it was 53,209 cases, or people that's been tested positive, and there was 709 deaths. And I checked it again last night, and it was 82 something. I don't quite remember. It's 82 something, and then the deaths have went from 709 to 1,200 or something. And so then I checked it again today, shortly before I started this lesson, and it has jumped to over 100,000 cases, 102,338 to be exact, at least from this specific site. And the deaths have now reached 1,600. So I say that because, once again, I don't fear the virus. I have no fear for the virus at all. I don't want to get it. I don't want to get sick at all. I don't want a cold, let alone the flu, let alone this virus. So understand that fear of a virus is not my concern. Even though I don't want to get it. But the way these numbers are jumping, just in 24 hours, these passive aggressive measures that they're taking right now in a lot of these places where, hey, it's kind of like, hey, please stay in your home, but you can, if you need to go to all these other places, feel free. Like here in Georgia, this whole passive aggressive stuff that they got going on here, non-essential businesses are supposed to be closed, but on the essential business list, you have banks, grocery stores, gas stations, convenience stores. Okay, I can understand. But then you got laundromats, you got parks, you got liquor stores, and you got restaurants, you got fast food joints. Here's another thing. So since we still are technically on the question, what do we do now? Make some lifestyle changes. You should not be focusing, or excuse me, let me rephrase that. You should not be even trying to get fast food at a time like this. Why, for the life of me, am I driving down the street and I see people at a Wendy's? I was like, it was only like 3 cars at this time, but there's all the fast food places around here are open. Why are people trying to get fast food from places where you don't know how they're handling the food? Like, these places aren't really good to get food from to begin with. But then you add on the fact that you got a lot of teenagers or teenagers / young adults who are the backbone of these infrastructures handling your food at a time like this. Please, ain't no way. When this thing, and I'm telling you, when I start seeing this stuff in the news that these places are still open, and then I'm seeing people still patronize these places, I'm like, that's one of the problems with this country. That we're still willing to do stuff like that in the midst of a pandemic. You don't know those people. Why would you trust them? Why would you trust them with your food? It's time to make some lifestyle changes. This should be a wake-up call across the board on so many levels. On so many levels, this should be a wake-up call. But let me try to wrap this up because this video is going much longer than I had originally anticipated. So, next question. Where are we going? Alright, so earlier I mentioned 9/11 and how after 9/11 you end up getting the Patriot Act and there were some things that end up occurring. You have to ask yourself, and honestly, and you have to think about it because sometimes these changes are subtle, but you have to ask yourself, did life return to the way we once knew it after 9/11? So the things go back to what we had considered normal after 9/11. Now you have to think long and hard because there are some things that occurred that may not affect you on a daily basis, but as a whole, did we return back to normal? And the answer to that is no. Once again, you got the Patriot Act that was implemented, so therefore surveillance on the citizens became much more prominent. It became something that was much more frequent, and it just doubled down on it, and now we're getting to the point to where we are now. And then not only that, travel. The way that we traveled changed. So if you try to go on a flight after 9/11, or even to this day, all these years later, almost 20 years later, you see the effects. You see the effects of it. You go to TCA and there's still bottles, certain size bottles that you can't bring, and liquids you can't bring, and you can't do this, you can't do that. And you got full body scans and all of this stuff. And this all happened after 9/11. So after this pandemic is over, whenever that's going to be, do we really believe that we're going to go back to life as we once knew it? Keeping in mind that the economy is collapsing. They're trying to bail out citizens right now. Businesses are failing. Small businesses, many of them will disappear because they just don't have the capital to sustain not having people to be able to patronize their business for a month or 2 months. A lot of big businesses I'm seeing are struggling with that. Like the layoffs and unemployment is about to skyrocket. We're going to end up in hyperinflation. But all of those things, all in all, that's not even what I'm referring to. Even though these things are stuff that we can actually see right now, what I'm referring to is, all right. So going back to that stimulus package for the citizens, that they first tried to do it and it was blocked. Then the second time they tried to do it and it was blocked. And the third time they tried to do it, it was passed, but something interesting happened. What was implemented in that stimulus package that was not put in there on the other two that was blocked? And that's the digital dollar. That's the digital dollar. And so when I saw this, I smiled and just shook my head. It was like typical. So typical. To take, like, America is such an opportunist. This nation is full of opportunists, right? And so they just slide that right on in when people are clamoring for this bailout. They just slide this old digital dollar in there. So how does that impact us? What is wrong with the digital dollar? All right, so if you are one of those people who have any type of mind to prepare, or if you've talked to some people, you may know that people were going to banks and they were withdrawing their money. They were withdrawing their money out. They maybe didn't do all of it. Some people only did portions of it. Some people did do all of it because you don't know what the banks were going to do, if the banks were going to collapse, if the banks was going to shut down, if there was some type of way that we would lose access to those funds on our cars or whatnot. That if you had the dollar, if you had this fiat currency, that you still would be able to make purchases, you would still be able to do transactions, you would still be able to operate by having that cash with you on hand. Not so with a digital dollar. So what a digital dollar does is that it pretty much eliminates any capacity for the individual to have any autonomy with his money. So every purchase can be traceable. So the government, if they want to, and we know they do, they can identify what everything you're spending money on, right? So they can identify where every single dollar that you get goes. And if something like this happens, you can't withdraw anything. That is eliminated. So now you have a pandemic or something, or some catastrophic event that occurs, and now you can no longer safeguard yourself from these institutions, which means that you lose more control over your own life and the government gains more control. So they have that footprint. And if they want to do something that's a little more on the wicked side and make mandatory vaccines, if you are someone who denies this vaccine, then they have the ability to cut you off from society. Like turn your account off, and then you can't do anything because now you can't make purchases with greenbacks anymore. Those things are going to go away. It's a paper currency anyway. It's a fiat currency anyway. It's not backed by anything, so it really has no intrinsic value anyway, except for the fact that people, especially this country and other countries, have made a decision that this is how we're going to transact business, is with this paper currency, or with this paper, and have it identified as currency. So that's taken out of the equation. And so now, once again, you lose more control. Saying you lose more control, you lose more freedom. That's the same thing that happened with 9/11. You lose control, you lose freedom. And what would occur, like I mentioned earlier, these passive aggressive safeguards that they're putting in place. They could put these things in place and say, hey, we tried to limit the virus. We tried to limit the virus. Money is dirty. We tried to limit it. People are still going out there, still doing this, XYZ. Let's bring in martial law. Let's get everything under control. The pieces are in place for them to do all of these things. Will martial law occur? I don't know. It's quite possible. There hasn't been a time in my lifetime where all the pieces have been in place that I can observe, where I see, hey, yes, it's the atmosphere is ripe for martial law. But once again, I don't say this to scare anyone, but we have to come to the realization, and this is why I labeled this video a sober reality, that things will not go back to the way they once were. I'm not saying it's going to be a steep fall off. It can. With all the stuff with the economy, it can be a drastic, steep drop. But I still believe that it would be more of a gradual incline, but we won't go back to the way things were. There are going to be changes. And you have to be prepared. You have to be prepared mentally. You have to be prepared spiritually. Trust and believe that when I tell you to prepare and store up on food and stuff like that, I don't do that not understanding that if you store up on food and you don't keep the law, statutes, and commandments, and you are of the covenant and you breaking the covenant, that storage of food, stock, and all this stuff is worthless. You might as well burn it. You might as well burn it. Get rid of it. It won't do you any good. Likewise, if you see the danger coming, and if you see the temperature, if you're able to gauge the temperature of the climate of America, and you don't prepare, then you will suffer. Times are only going to get harder from here. I do not believe that this is the end all be all, but I do believe that this is the beginning of the end. I do believe this is the beginning of the end. And who knows how long that's going to be. There's a lot more that has to happen. We know that there's, at least we believe that there's going to be a third world war, and America is not going to come out on top of that. And if we haven't been delivered from out this country, once again, we will feel the effects of it. Keep in mind, there is no pre-trib rapture. There is no rapture. We're not just going to be lifted into the air and then everything is just go to hell. No, we're going to be here. So we're going to be affected, even if it's not for us. We live here. We have to endure. Otherwise, why say endure to the end? Do we not understand what endure means? You got to be going through something to endure. So I don't know what's going to happen as far as details. I know the end game, right? I know the end game. I've read the back of the book. I know who wins. But I don't know every single step that they're going to make and how long it's going to be and how long this is going to play out. But keep in mind that you have the opportunity to protect yourself and to protect your family and to safeguard yourselves as much as possible. As much as possible. That does not omit obedience, because when you are disobedient, you open yourself up for all types of dangers, for all types of attacks, spiritual and physical. So your preparation does not omit obedience. There has to be balance. There has to be both. Understand that. Do not misunderstand what I'm saying. Anyone who knows me knows that that's how I feel. You need to do both. Faith and works. Faith and works. We are not Christians. Faith and works. It's not just faith. It's not. Things are going to change. And this is the sober reality. And the quicker that we can get a grasp on this and we understand this, that this is where we are, the better off we'll be. This isn't the end. It's just the beginning of it.